The gunshot echoed across the Montana prairie as Josephine Keller clutched her swollen belly and ran, her heart pounding faster than the hoofbeats pursuing her through the tall grass. 7 months pregnant and fleeing from the man who'd promised her the world only to reveal himself as a monster. This wasn't how she'd imagined her life at 22. The year was 1878, and the untamed wilderness of the Montana Territory stretched before her like an unforgiving canvas of browns and golds under the setting sun. Josephine had come west with dreams of adventure and a new beginning. Instead, she found herself unmarried, carrying a child and running for her life from Theo Harrington, the charming outlaw who'd seduced her with promises of love before revealing his true violent nature. "You can't run forever, Joe," Theo's voice carried on the wind. "That's my child you're carrying." Josephine ducked into a ravine, her cotton dress snagging on brambles. Her chest burned with each labored breath as she pressed deeper into the shadows. The baby kicked inside her, as if sensing her terror. Night was falling fast, and with it came the bitter cold of the Montana autumn. She needed shelter, warmth, and a miracle. When the sound of hoofbeats finally faded into the distance, Josephine emerged from her hiding place. The vast emptiness of the frontier stretched around her in every direction. She was alone, truly alone, for the first time since arriving out west. Her fingers traced the slight curve of her belly as tears tracked silently down her dirt-smudged face. "I'll protect you," she whispered to her unborn child. Somehow. A distant light flickered through the gathering darkness, a lantern, or perhaps a campfire. Desperation pushed Josephine forward despite her exhaustion. Each step sent pain shooting through her swollen ankles, but the light represented her only hope of survival. As she drew closer, the outline of a small ranch came into view. A modest cabin stood beside a corral containing several horses. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth within. Josephine hesitated at the edge of the property. She had no idea who might live here or whether they would turn her away or, worse, return her to Theo. The door to the cabin swung open, spilling golden lamplight onto the ground. A tall figure stepped out, rifle in hand. "Who's there?" A deep, cautious voice called out. "Show yourself." With nowhere left to run, Josephine stepped forward into the light. "Please," she called, her voice breaking. "I need help." The man lowered his rifle slightly as she approached. He stood over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and a face weathered by sun and wind. His dark hair fell to his shoulders, and his eyes blue as the Montana sky narrowed as they took in her condition. "Name's Preston Quinn," he said gruffly. "This is my ranch." "Josephine Keller," she replied, swaying slightly as a wave of dizziness washed over her. "I'm sorry to trouble you, but I have nowhere else to go." Preston's gaze dropped to her belly, then scanned the darkness behind her. "Husband?" Josephine flinched at the question. "There's no husband," she admitted, bracing herself for judgment or dismissal. "Just a man who isn't worthy of the title." To her surprise, Preston simply nodded and stepped aside, holding the door open wider. "Come in before you catch your death out here." The cabin was simple but clean. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, and the scents of coffee and stew filled the air. Preston guided her to a chair at the rough-hewn table. "Sit," he instructed, pouring her a cup of coffee. "When's the last time you ate?" "Yesterday morning," Josephine admitted, wrapping her cold fingers around the warm mug. Preston made no comment, simply ladled stew into a bowl and placed it before her along with a chunk of cornbread. As Josephine ate, he busied himself around the cabin, giving her space to collect herself. "You running from trouble?" he finally asked, sitting across from her. Josephine hesitated, then nodded. "His name is Theo Harrington. He has a violent temper, When I told him about the baby, he was pleased at first, but then she shuddered. I found out he's wanted in 3 territories. When I tried to leave, he threatened to kill me. Said no one else would have me like this anyway. Preston's jaw tightened. Harrington's gang hit the stage to Helena last month, killed 2 men. Fear clutched at Josephine's heart. He'll find me. He always does. Not here, Preston said firmly. Not on my land. Why would you help me? Josephine asked, suspicious of kindness after months of cruelty. You don't know me. Preston was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the fire. My sister was in a similar situation once. No one helped her. He looked up, his eyes reflecting old pain. She didn't survive. The simple explanation hit Josephine like a physical blow. I'm sorry. Preston stood and collected her empty bowl. You can have the bed, I'll take the chair by the fire. I couldn't possibly. You're carrying a child, he interrupted. Take the bed. Too exhausted to argue, Josephine nodded gratefully. The bed was simple, a rope frame with a straw-filled mattress, but it felt like heaven after weeks of sleeping rough. As she drifted toward sleep, she heard Preston moving around the cabin, checking doors and windows, securing their safety. For the first time in months, Josephine slept without fear. Morning brought clarity and awkwardness. Josephine woke to find Preston already up, cooking breakfast over the fire. The reality of her situation weighed heavily upon her. She was an unmarried pregnant woman taking charity from a stranger. No respectable town would accept her. No decent family would take her in. The baby moved within her, a persistent reminder of the life she was responsible for. I should move on today, she said as Preston handed her a plate of eggs and bacon. I'm grateful for your hospitality, but I don't want to bring trouble to your door. Preston regarded her with those steady blue eyes. And where will you go? The question hung between them, unanswerable. Josephine had no family in the territory, no friends, no money. There's work here that needs doing, Preston said after a moment. I could use help with cooking, mending, keeping accounts. The barn loft can be converted to a proper room. You'd have privacy there. Josephine stared at him in disbelief. You'd let me stay knowing my situation. Your situation is you're expecting a child and need safe harbor, Preston said simply. What others might think doesn't concern me. People will talk, Josephine warned. They'll assume the worst about both of us. A ghost of a smile touched Preston's lips. Madam, the nearest neighbors are 15 miles away. The closest town is a full day's ride. Out here, a man's business is his own. Hope fluttered in Josephine's chest, but caution tempered it. And after the baby comes, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Preston replied. For now, you need rest and safety. I can provide both. It was a temporary solution, but Josephine had no better options. She nodded her acceptance, overwhelmed by this unexpected kindness. True to his word, Preston spent the next day transforming the barn loft into a comfortable room. He brought in a proper bed from the storage shed, hung canvas over the windows for privacy, and even produced a small mirror and washstand. By nightfall, Josephine had a space to call her own. Days passed in a rhythm of work and quiet companionship. Preston taught Josephine about ranch life, the care of horses, the rhythm of seasons, the constant vigilance required to survive on the frontier. He was a patient teacher and seemed genuinely appreciative of her help with cooking and household tasks. They settled into an easy partnership, speaking when necessary but comfortable with silence. At night, Josephine would often catch Preston staring at her belly with an unreadable expression. Not disgust or judgment, but something more complex. Once, when she asked what he was thinking, he simply replied, "Every child deserves a fair chance." It was in these small moments that Josephine began to understand the kind of man Preston Quinn truly was. Beneath his rough exterior beat a heart of profound decency. As her pregnancy advanced, Preston insisted she rest more and work less. He would return from long days tending cattle or mending fences to take over cooking duties, awkwardly but determinedly preparing meals. When Josephine expressed guilt about not pulling her weight, he dismissed her concerns with characteristic brevity. "Bringing a new life into the world is work enough," he said. One evening, as winter settled over the Montana landscape, Preston returned from town with unexpected treasures: fabric for baby clothes, a wooden cradle he'd traded for with a carpenter, and books on childbirth. "The midwife in town compiled these notes," he explained, handing Josephine a leather-bound journal. "She said to study them. Snow comes heavy in these parts. Roads might be impassable when your time comes." The reality of giving birth so far from medical help terrified Josephine, but Preston's matter-of-fact preparations somehow calmed her fears. He was planning for her child's arrival with more care than its own father ever had. That night, as they sat by the fire, Josephine finally gathered the courage to ask the question that had been haunting her. "Why are you alone out here, Preston? You're kind, capable. Why no wife or family?" Preston was silent for so long that Josephine thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and measured. "I was engaged once. Sarah was her name. We had plans, dreams." His fingers absently twisted the cup in his hands. "The war changed everything. I came back. Different," she tried to understand, "but some ghosts are too heavy to share." He looked up, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "She married a shopkeeper in St. Louis, has 3 children now." "I'm sorry," Josephine said softly. Preston shrugged. "It was for the best. Some men aren't meant for family life." "I don't believe that," Josephine countered. "You have more kindness in you than most men I've known who call themselves family men." A faint smile touched Preston's lips. "Kindness is easy when it comes to you." The words hung between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Josephine felt her cheeks flush and changed the subject to safer territory. As December arrived with howling winds and deep snow, Josephine's time grew near. Her body felt heavy and unwieldy, her emotions raw and unpredictable. One morning she broke down in tears over spilled flour, overwhelmed by uncertainty about the future. Preston found her sobbing in the kitchen, his usual composure giving way to alarm. "Are you hurt? Is it the baby? What kind of life can I give this child?" Josephine cried. "No father, no name, no place in society. Everyone will know it was born in sin." Preston knelt beside her chair, his calloused hands gently covering hers. "A child born of love, even misplaced love, isn't born in sin. And any life with you as its mother will be rich in what matters most. And when people shun us, when doors close in our faces, then you'll have a door that's always open," Preston said firmly. "Here with me." Josephine stared at him, scarcely believing his words. "You can't mean that." "I don't say things I don't mean, Josephine." His eyes held hers, steady and sure. "Your child will have a home here as long as you both want it." Something shifted between them in that moment, a deepening of trust, a tentative reaching toward possibility. But before Josephine could respond, pain lanced through her abdomen, sharp and insistent. Her water broke in a sudden rush, soaking her skirts and the floor beneath. "The baby," she gasped. "It's coming." Preston's face paled, but his actions remained decisive. He carried Josephine to her bed, gathered the supplies they'd prepared, and began heating water. Despite his obvious nervousness, his presence calmed Josephine as the pains intensified. "I'm not leaving you," he promised, holding her hand between contractions. "We'll face this together." The labor lasted through the day and into the night, a blur of pain and exhaustion for Josephine. Preston stayed beside her, wiping her brow, offering water, reading instructions from the midwife's notes, and encouraging her with steady words when her strength flagged. "You're the strongest person I know," he told her during a particularly difficult moment. "This child is lucky to have you for its mother." As dawn broke on December 10, 1878, Josephine gave birth to a daughter tiny, perfect, with a shock of dark hair and lungs powerful enough to announce her arrival to the world. Preston caught the infant in gentle hands that trembled only slightly, cut the cord as directed in the midwife's notes, and placed the crying bundle on Josephine's chest. "She's beautiful," he whispered, voice thick with emotion, "just like her mother." Exhausted but elated, Josephine gazed down at her daughter's face. "Hello, little one. I've been waiting for you." The baby's cries subsided as she nestled against her mother's warmth. Preston watched them both with wonder in his eyes, a look so tender it brought fresh tears to Josephine's. "What will you name her?" he asked softly. Josephine considered for a moment. "Emma," she decided. "It means whole or universal because she makes my world complete." Preston smiled, reaching out to touch the infant's tiny hand. "Emma," he repeated. "It suits her." In the days that followed, Preston revealed a gentle nature Josephine had only glimpsed before. He held Emma with confident care, walking the floor with her when she fussed at night so Josephine could rest. He built a cradle for her room and another for the main cabin, ensuring the baby was never far from watchful eyes. "You're a natural with her," Josephine observed one evening as Preston rocked Emma to sleep, humming a tune his mother had once sung to him. "She makes it easy," he replied, gazing down at the sleeping infant. "Never known such a perfect little thing." As winter deepened, the three of them settled into a routine that felt surprisingly like family. The cabin, once sparse and utilitarian, grew warmer with Emma's presence. Preston began carving wooden toys for when she was older, while Josephine sewed colorful quilts to brighten the walls. Christmas arrived with a fresh snowfall that transformed the landscape into a glistening wonderland. Preston surprised Josephine with a pine tree cut from the hillside, which they decorated with strings of dried berries and paper stars. He presented her with a silver locket he'd ordered months earlier from a catalog. "For Emma's portrait when we can get to a photographer in spring," he explained, watching Josephine's face light up with pleasure. "It's beautiful," she whispered, touching the delicate engraving. "I have something for you too." She handed him a package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a knitted scarf in deep blue wool. "To match your eyes," she said shyly. "It's not much, but it's perfect," Preston interrupted, wrapping it around his neck immediately. "No one's made me anything in years." That night, as Emma slept peacefully in her cradle, Preston and Josephine sat before the fire, closer than they'd ever allowed themselves before. The firelight cast golden shadows across their faces as they spoke of childhoods, dreams, and the unexpected turns life had taken. "I never thought I'd feel safe again," Josephine admitted. "After Theo, I believed all men were wolves in waiting." Preston's hand found hers, tentative yet sure. "Not all men. Some of us just want to be worthy of the trust you place in us." Josephine looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "You've been more than worthy, Preston. You've been my salvation." The moment hung between them, fragile with possibility. Preston leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. Instead, Josephine met him halfway, their lips touching in a kiss so gentle it felt like a question. When they parted, Preston's eyes searched hers. "I don't want to presume," he said hoarsely. "You're not," Josephine assured him, her heart racing. "I've wanted that for longer than I've admitted to myself." Their second kiss held more certainty, a promise rather than a question. When they finally drew apart, Preston rested his forehead against hers. "I never expected to find you," he whispered. "Either of you." As January turned to February, their connection deepened. Stolen kisses and lingering touches marked their days as they navigated this new terrain between them. Preston was unfailingly respectful, never pushing for more than Josephine was ready to give. She, in turn, found herself falling for his steady presence, his integrity, and the tenderness he showed not only to her but to Emma. One night, as a blizzard raged outside, Preston confessed the depth of his feelings. "I love you, Josephine," he said simply. "You and Emma both. I want to be a family, a real family, if you'll have me." Joy bloomed in Josephine's heart, but caution tempered it. What about Emma's father? What if Theo returns? Preston's expression hardened. "Let him try. This land, this home, it's defensible, and I won't let anyone harm either of you." "It's not just that," Josephine admitted. "Emma isn't yours by blood. Some men might resent raising another man's child." "Blood doesn't make a father," Preston said firmly. "Love does. Presence does. I've held that little girl every day since she came into this world. I've watched her grow, heard her first cries. As far as my heart's concerned, she's mine." Tears filled Josephine's eyes at his words. "You truly mean that, don't you?" "With everything I am," Preston assured her. He took her hands in his. "Josephine Keller, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Let me be a husband to you and a father to Emma." "Yes," Josephine whispered, joy bursting through her like sunlight. "Yes, with all my heart." They were married in early March when the passes had cleared enough for the circuit preacher to reach them. It was a simple ceremony in the cabin, with Emma cooing in a basket decorated with early spring wildflowers. The preacher raised his eyebrows slightly at the infant's presence, but said nothing when he saw the devotion in Preston's eyes as he took Josephine's hand and spoke his vows. "I promise to cherish you both all the days of my life," Preston declared. "To protect you, provide for you, and love you as my own." As they exchanged rings, simple gold bands Preston had purchased in town, Josephine felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was her family, her home, her future, unexpected but perfect in its own way. That night, after the preacher had departed and Emma was asleep, husband and wife came together for the first time. Preston's touches were reverent, his patience infinite as he helped Josephine reclaim intimacy as something beautiful rather than something to fear. In his arms she found both passion and peace, the ghosts of her past finally laid to rest. "I never thought I could be this happy," she confessed afterward, nestled against his chest. Preston kissed her forehead gently. "You deserve every happiness, Josephine Quinn." The new name sent a thrill through her. "Say it again." "Mrs. Josephine Quinn," he obliged, smiling against her hair. "Mother of Emma Quinn, wife of the luckiest man in Montana Territory." Spring brought new beginnings to the Quinn ranch. The cattle Preston had acquired over the years gave birth to healthy calves. The kitchen garden Josephine planted flourished, and Emma grew stronger daily. Her dark eyes, so like her mother's, followed the movement of her new parents with infant curiosity. Preston proved to be the father he'd promised to be, spending every free moment with Emma. He built her a special chair so she could sit at the table with them, crafted toys for her growing hands, and read to her from books he ordered specifically for children. In the evenings, he would place her on his knee and tell her stories about brave horses and resilient pioneers, weaving life lessons into tales appropriate for infant ears. "She doesn't understand a word," Josephine pointed out one evening, smiling at the sight. "Maybe not the words," Preston replied, bouncing Emma gently, "but she understands the love behind them." As Emma reached her 6-month milestone, Preston suggested they make a trip to town. Josephine hesitated, apprehensive about facing strangers who might judge her for having a child clearly born out of wedlock. "You're my wife now," Preston reminded her gently. Emma is my daughter in every way that matters. Let anyone try to say different. His confidence gave Josephine courage. They loaded the wagon with supplies to trade, dressed in their finest clothes, and made the journey to Silver Creek, the nearest settlement of any size. Silver Creek proved to be a typical frontier town, a main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a saloon, a general store, and a small church. Curious eyes followed the Quinn family as Preston helped Josephine down from the wagon, Emma secured in a sling across her mother's chest. The general store owner, Mr. Turner, greeted Preston warmly. "Quinn, haven't seen you since before the big snow. Thought you might have frozen solid out there." "Had more important matters to attend to," Preston replied, placing a protective hand at the small of Josephine's back. "Mr. Turner, I'd like you to meet my wife, Josephine, and our daughter, Emma." Turner's eyebrows rose slightly as he took in Emma's age, but Preston's steady gaze challenged him to comment. Instead, the shopkeeper smiled and extended his hand to Josephine. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Quinn. Your husband's one of our most valued customers." Throughout the day, they encountered similar reactions: initial surprise followed by acceptance, particularly when people witnessed Preston's obvious devotion to both mother and child. He proudly carried Emma when Josephine needed to try on fabric for new clothes, introduced his family to everyone they met, and made it abundantly clear through word and deed that Emma was his daughter in heart if not in blood. At the photographer's studio, they sat for a family portrait, Josephine seated with Emma on her lap, Preston standing proudly behind them, his hand resting on his wife's shoulder. When the photographer suggested they might want individual portraits as well, Preston shook his head. "We're a family," he said firmly. "We belong together in the frame as in life." The moment that truly sealed their public acceptance came at the church, where they stopped to arrange for Emma's christening. The young minister greeted them kindly but looked confused when Preston gave Emma's birth date. "I see," the minister said carefully. "And you'd like her christened as Emma Quinn?" "That's her name," Preston replied without hesitation. "She's my daughter." "Of course, but—" The minister lowered his voice. "For the church records, I should note her circumstances of birth." Before Josephine could speak, Preston stepped forward, his voice low but clear. "Her circumstances are that she's the beloved daughter of Preston and Josephine Quinn. That's all that matters to God or man." The minister, faced with Preston's unwavering certainty, nodded and made the appropriate notations in his book. As they left the church, Josephine squeezed her husband's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Preston shook his head. "Nothing to thank me for. Just speaking the truth as I see it." Their family's legitimacy established in the eyes of the community, Josephine felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They completed their business in town and started the journey home, Emma sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms as the wagon rolled through the golden afternoon light. "I was so afraid," Josephine admitted as they traveled, "of judgment, of whispers behind our backs." "People can whisper all they want," Preston replied. "Doesn't change what we know to be true." That truth became even more apparent as Emma grew from infant to toddler. She took her first steps staggering toward Preston's outstretched hands, her face alight with determination and trust. Her first word, "Papa," brought tears to his eyes that he didn't bother to hide. By her first birthday, Emma bore no resemblance to the man who had sired her. Instead, she had developed mannerisms that mirrored Preston's: a certain tilt of the head when curious, a particular smile reserved for moments of mischief. She followed him everywhere, perched on his shoulders to check cattle, helped him with chores, and demanded bedtime stories in the specific cadence he used. "She may not have your blood," Josephine observed one evening as they watched Emma sleeping, "but she has your spirit." Preston smiled, the expression softening his weathered features. Children become what they're surrounded by. She's surrounded by love. That love only deepened when, in the spring of 1880, Josephine discovered she was expecting again. Preston's joy at the news was boundless. He lifted her off her feet in celebration, then immediately set her down with apologies for his exuberance. "Are you happy?" he asked anxiously. "Is it too soon?" Josephine laughed, touching his worried face. "I'm overjoyed. Emma will make a wonderful big sister." Throughout this pregnancy, Josephine experienced a peace she'd never known with Emma. Preston's constant support, the security of their marriage, and the absence of fear made all the difference. He insisted on taking on more household duties, enlisted a neighbor woman to help with laundry, and read every medical book he could find about childbirth and infant care. "You don't need to worry so much," Josephine told him one night as he pored over a medical text. "I've done this before. And I intend to make sure this time is easier in every way possible," Preston replied, not looking up from his reading. In November 1880, their son arrived after a labor mercifully shorter than Emma's had been. Preston was present throughout, holding Josephine's hand and whispering encouragement until their child entered the world with a robust cry. "A boy," the midwife announced, placing the red-faced infant on Josephine's chest. "Strong lungs on this one." Preston stared at his son with wonder, gently touching the tiny hand that curled reflexively around his finger. "He's perfect," he whispered. "Just perfect." They named him James after Preston's father. 2-year-old Emma was fascinated by her new brother, peering at him with solemn curiosity when Preston first introduced them. "Baby," she declared, pointing at the bundle in her mother's arms. "That's right, sweetheart," Preston confirmed, lifting her onto the bed beside Josephine. "This is your brother James. You're a big sister now." Emma considered this information carefully, then patted the baby's head with surprising gentleness. "My brother," she said proudly. Josephine and Preston exchanged smiles over their children's heads, hearts full with the family they had created together. As the years passed, the Quinn ranch prospered. Preston's careful management and Josephine's shrewd business sense allowed them to expand their holdings, add a proper barn, and eventually build a larger home with enough rooms for their growing family. Emma thrived as a big sister, particularly after the arrival of another sister, Sarah, in 1882. The ranch became known throughout the territory for its quality horses and cattle. Preston's reputation as a fair businessman grew, bringing more opportunities their way. Josephine, with her gift for numbers, kept the accounts and eventually began corresponding with Eastern buyers directly, expanding their market reach. Through it all, the foundation of their success remained the same: the love between a man and woman who had found each other when they needed it most, and the family they had built together from unexpected beginnings. Emma grew into a confident young girl with her mother's intelligence and her father's steadfast nature. Preston taught her to ride, rope, and read the land as he did. Josephine ensured she received proper education, ordering books from back east and eventually arranging for a tutor to visit the ranch regularly to teach all 3 children. There were difficult times, of course. The winter of 1883 brought blizzards that threatened their livestock. A drought in 1885 tested their resilience. Through each challenge, the Quinn family faced adversity as they faced everything else together, with unwavering support for one another. Only once did shadows from the past intrude upon their hard-won happiness. In the summer of 1886, when Emma was 7, a rider appeared at the ranch while Preston was in town. Josephine recognized Theo Harrington immediately, though the years had not been kind to him. His once handsome face was now marked by scars and dissipation, his eyes hard with bitterness. "Hello, Joe," he said, dismounting slowly. "Been a long time." Emma stood in the doorway behind her mother, watching with curious eyes. Josephine placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "What do you want, Theo?" she asked coldly. His gaze shifted to Emma, narrowing as he studied her features. "So this is my girl," he said. "Looks like her mother." "She's not your girl," Josephine replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "She's Preston Quinn's daughter in every way that matters." Theo laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet afternoon. "Pretty words don't change blood, Joe. I heard about your good fortune married to a prosperous rancher, living the respectable life. Thought I might remind you where you came from." "I know exactly where I came from," Josephine said. "And I know where I belong now." "Does Quinn know he's raising my get?" Theo asked cruelly. "He knows Emma's history," Josephine replied, "and loves her as his own." Theo took a step forward, his hand moving toward his gun belt. "Maybe I should take what's mine." Before he could come closer, the sound of approaching horses made him pause. Preston appeared at the edge of the property, riding hard with two ranch hands flanking him. He'd seen the unfamiliar horse tied at his hitching post from the road and sensed trouble. Dismounting in a fluid motion, Preston positioned himself between his family and Theo. "You're trespassing on private property," he said evenly. "Just visiting my woman and my child," Theo replied with a smirk. Preston's expression remained impassive, but his eyes hardened. "There's no one here who belongs to you, Harrington. My wife and daughter are under my protection." "Daughter," Theo spat. "That's my blood she carries." "Blood doesn't make a father," Preston replied, echoing the words he'd spoken to Josephine years before. "I've raised her, loved her, taught her. She bears my name and my heart. Now I suggest you leave before I forget my Christian charity." Theo's hand hovered near his gun, calculating his odds against Preston and the two armed ranch hands. After a tense moment, he stepped back toward his horse. "This isn't over, Quinn." "It was over the day you raised a hand to Josephine," Preston countered. "You lost any claim to either of them in that moment." As Theo mounted his horse, Emma stepped forward, looking up at him with clear, unafraid eyes. "My papa is Preston Quinn," she said firmly. "I don't know you, mister." The simple declaration from the child's lips seemed to strike Theo more forcefully than any threat could have. He stared at Emma for a long moment, then turned his horse and rode away without another word. That night, after the younger children were asleep, Josephine found Emma sitting on the porch steps, unusually quiet. "That man today," Emma said as her mother sat beside her. "He was the one who hurt you before Papa found us, wasn't he?" Josephine hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. But that was a long time ago." Emma considered this, her young face serious in the moonlight. "And he's the one whose blood I have, not Papa's." The question Josephine had dreaded for years hung in the air between them. She took her daughter's hand gently. "Your father is the man who raised you, who loves you, who would do anything to protect you," she said carefully. "Sometimes families are made in different ways, Emma. Some through birth, some through choice. The family we choose with our hearts is just as real, sometimes more real than the one we're born into." Emma nodded slowly. "I choose Papa," she said simply. "He's my real father." "Yes, he is," Josephine agreed, hugging her daughter close, "and nothing can ever change that." When Preston came looking for them a short while later, he found mother and daughter still sitting together on the steps, looking up at the stars. Without a word, he settled beside them, placing an arm around each. Emma leaned against his solid presence. "Papa," she said quietly, "I'm glad you chose us." Preston's voice was husky with emotion when he replied, "Best choice I ever made, Emma Quinn. Best choice I ever made." Theo Harrington never returned to the Quinn ranch. They heard rumors over the years that he'd been killed in a bar fight in Wyoming, that he'd been captured by a U.S. Marshal in Colorado, that he'd fled to Mexico. Whatever his fate, he remained a ghost from the past, unable to touch the reality of the family Preston and Josephine had built. As the territory moved toward statehood, the Quinn Ranch became one of the most respected in Montana. Preston's fair dealing and Josephine's business acumen earned them a place among the founding families of the region. Their children grew tall and strong, secure in the knowledge they were loved unconditionally. Emma, at 16, showed a remarkable talent for horse breeding, developing an eye for quality stock that rivaled her father's. James, at 14, demonstrated mechanical aptitude, constantly improving the ranch's equipment and dreaming of the new century's technological advances. Sarah, at 12, revealed her mother's gift for numbers and organization, keeping track of the ranch's expanding operations with precocious efficiency. On the evening of their 20th wedding anniversary, Preston and Josephine sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Their children were inside, preparing a surprise celebration dinner, their gift to the parents who had given them so much. "Did you ever imagine this?" Josephine asked, her hand entwined with Preston's. "That night I stumbled onto your property, pregnant and terrified." Preston smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening with the expression. Gray now touched his temples, but his gaze remained as clear and steady as the day they'd met. "I knew that night that my life had changed," he admitted. "I just didn't know how completely." "You saved us," Josephine said softly. Preston shook his head. "No, love, you saved me. I was existing, not living, before you and Emma came into my life." The door opened behind them as Emma appeared, now a young woman with her mother's beauty and a confidence all her own. "Dinner's ready," she announced. "James didn't burn anything this time, and Sarah made your favorite pie." Preston stood, helping Josephine to her feet with the same tenderness he'd shown for 20 years. "Sounds perfect." As they moved toward the warm light of home, Josephine paused to look back at the vast Montana landscape that had witnessed their journey. From a desperate pregnant woman fleeing violence to the matriarch of a thriving family, her path had been unexpected but blessed beyond measure. "Thank you," she whispered, both to the land that had sheltered them and to the man who had opened his heart to a woman carrying another man's child. Preston squeezed her hand in response, understanding as he always did. "No, Josephine, thank you for making me a father, a husband, a complete man." Inside, their children waited, the family they had built together through choice rather than obligation, through love rather than duty. Emma, who had brought them together. James and Sarah, who had completed their circle. And at the center, the enduring bond between a cowboy who had recognized his heart's home in a desperate stranger's eyes, and a woman who had found the courage to trust again. In the wild Montana territory, where so many sought fortune and found hardship instead, Preston and Josephine Quinn had discovered the greatest wealth of all, a love strong enough to create family from the most unexpected beginnings.